Good morning. A really warm welcome. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be here this morning to help celebrate what I feel is a bit of a bastion of equality and sisterhood and progress, both for us as individuals, but also for us as a sector. My name is Joanna. By day, I am a leadership and performance coach, which means I spend every single day of my life helping people be brilliant at whatever it is that they do, whatever walk of life they're in, whatever sector, whatever role, whatever grade. And part of helping people be brilliant is dealing with issues such as stress, because what we do know is that stress gets in the way of the most brilliant of performance. So I don't know if you remember recently, poor Naomi Osaka had to remove herself from the French Open as a result of stress. So today I'm going to be talking to you about building your resilience muscle. If I could have my first slide up, that would be awesome. Now, why do I call it a muscle? Well, for two reasons, really. The first one is just like any other muscle in our body, if we ignore it, it atrophies. And for me, resilience is something that needs us to work at very intentionally. Secondly, just like muscles, you have to build them in the right way. So if I want to, build one particular part of my body, there are better exercises and worse exercises for doing exactly that. So I'm going to talk to you about how you build your resilience muscle today, and the emphasis is on your, and that will become apparent in a bit, in order so you can continue to be brilliant in whatever it is that you do, and in particular in service of the defence and security sector. I'm going to take about 35 to 40 minutes to tell a story and to get on a bit of a soapbox of mine and give you a hypothesis for what I feel about stress. And hopefully that will leave plenty of time for questions at the end. And I'm hoping that sounds all right. So if I could have my next slide, please. So this is our journey that we're going to take together. So the first off, I'm going to share a story which indicates the origins of my interest in the topics of stress and resilience and why I feel the way I do about it and what that has done in terms of my interest, my research and my application in my day-to-day job. I'm going to share some eye-watering statistics about the impact of stress in the workplace and therefore why doing something about it is all of our responsibilities and super important. I'm going to share a hypothesis about stress being unique and introduce this notion that there is an opportunity for us to diagnose our stress. And I'll help you understand what I mean by that in a bit. All of that leads to us having a personalized resilience plan. So just like I said at the beginning, we'll be doing the right exercises to stop our resilience muscle atrophying. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to get started on that personalized resilience plan. First up, I think we're going to launch a poll. What I'm really interested to understand is right now, right here, how are you feeling? What is your stress levels? And I think there are 3 answers for you to choose from. And I'm hoping the lovely folks behind the scenes are going to be able to run that for me. I'm going to look down at my my phone here so I can see the poll results, not because I've decided that it's much more interesting. I'm not seeing anything at the moment, but I'm hoping that somebody might give me a sense of what the answers look like, if that poll is indeed working. Shall I crack on? Let's crack on. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so picture the scene. It is 2008. I am not in this pretty frock. Instead, I'm in a deeply unflattering and, let's face it, probably ill-fitting deep blue, heavy cotton shirt and trousers. I'm in the Royal Navy. I'm on board the Royal Navy's Antarctic patrol vessel, HMS Endurance, shown here. I think this is Grytviken in South Georgia. Endurance has been away for about 12 months. We've still got about another 6 months to go, and we're currently in the South Atlantic, so we're all kind of tired, really. It's 4 p.m. on the 16th of December, I'm about to go and watch an episode of 24. Like all good deployments, there's a box set that you get stuck into, and mine was 24. Jack Bauer is about to have one of his usual epic tough days. And little did I realise I was about to enter my own mini-series of 24 just on this occasion. Next slide, please. At 8 minutes past 4, I heard a sound that no naval officer wants to hear. Flood, 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 flood in the engine room. That was repeated 3 times. Now, I won't go into the details. There's a fabulous Board of Inquiry report if you're curious to know more. But suffice to say that we'd suffered an engineering problem which caused us to take on water at an alarming rate. The hole on the hull was about the size of a bin lid. And that created a column of water that was like concrete. It was impenetrable. You couldn't put your hand through it. And there was certainly no putting the lid back on. Now, if you've ever seen the films Titanic and Poseidon Adventure, that was us kind of smashed together. The water was coming in so fast, it was like emptying an Olympic-sized swimming pool into our engine room super quick. Now, that's a problem, because in the engine room are everything that we need to survive: power, propulsion, heating, lighting, drinking water, toilet facilities, our ability to communicate with the outside world. And we lost all of that in 30 minutes. Now, as you can see from this picture, the seas down there in the South Atlantic are a little bit choppy. For point of reference, the little ball you can see on the top of the mast is about 31 meters high, so give you a sense of scale of the size of the waves. So unsurprisingly, when we were no longer in charge of our own ship's movement, the waves were, which meant we soon started to roll really badly. Imagine doing your job on a bouncy castle with somebody really large bouncing next to you. It was quite distracting and made life quite difficult. If you can click on 2 for me, please. So there's little old me, look. My role on board is twofold. The first one is a little bit dull. It's basically support in all of its glory. So feeding people, paying people, clothing people, cash and banking services, vendoring services, flights back to the UK, getting rid of rubbish. All necessary. Inclined attention. The minute the ship set sail, the 120 members of the ship's company turn into Michelin star chefs. The second role is much more interesting. I'm like an orchestra conductor. But instead of making sweet music, my role is to direct the efforts of the ship's company to where they're needed most when it comes to a catastrophic incident like a flood. The second thing I do is to help the command understand whether we're winning or losing so they can make the tough decision, stay on, get off. Next slide, please. Back one, please. Thank you. So we are in the middle of nowhere. We are 6 hours from help. Our nearest neighbour is Argentina. They were not in a rush to come and give us a hand. We are 12 minutes from evacuating the ship. We set a timeline for when we thought we should evacuate the ship. We didn't call it abandoning ship or even evacuating ship, actually. We thought that was a little bit alarmist. So what we did was instead we called it stepping ashore. In 12 minutes' time, we were going to step ashore into life rafts and waves that were size of a double-decker bus. Next slide, please. Now, the reason I'm here to tell this tale is because we caught a lucky break. Our anchor managed to catch hold of the only pinnacle in our local area, and it bought us time so that help could actually reach us from Chile. Now, I've given you the highlights of what is a great story. That's definitely over a glass of wine kind of story. But why am I telling you this story, or DIT, as we used to call it in the Royal Navy? I learnt a lot from this highly stressful event. It probably won't surprise you too much to know that I was highly stressed. And it's that learning, particularly with the benefit of hindsight, that I kind of apply to my day job and myself as we speak. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, there's a full list of stress symptoms that if you'd asked me at the time, I wouldn't have said were the case, or I wouldn't have attributed to stress. Let me list them for you. I became a bit sweary. If you've ever seen the film Wolf of Wall Street, I think the F word appears something like 2.8 times a minute or something, and I'm pretty sure I could beat that then. My heart rate was elevated, which made it difficult to sleep when your heart's doing 120 beats per minute. I was ill a lot, bronchitis and tonsillitis at the same time twice, only about a month apart. At one point, I got pins and needles in my face. I was quick to emotion, both anger and tears. I lost my memory about the first 12 hours of the incident. Anything I know about the event has actually been given to me by shipmates. I used to speak really fast, like a robot stuck on fast forward. I'd suffer with insomnia. I've got this habit where if I'm stressed, I start really rubbing my eyes. So, I end up carrying baggage, like get me excess baggage at Heathrow. And I used to chew my fingers. So at one point, they looked like I'd shoved them all into one of those old-fashioned pencil sharpeners. So here's the question, right? How do you come back from something like that? Next slide, please. So I've talked about my stress. Now let's talk about stress in the workplace. So this is taken from the Health and Safety Executive Report. They do an annual report every year into work-related stress, depression and anxiety. Two things to note. The first one is this report was published in November last year and only goes up to March last year. So this is pre-COVID, and we'd already seen quite a significant uptick in the work-related stress, depression and anxiety. So what do we think post-COVID is going to look like? Secondly, next click for me, please. The two main causes that people worry about stress in the workplace, they call it insufficient managerial support and an unsustainable workload. I've shorthanded that to bad boss and heavy workload. So here's the thing. If you're a leader and you're not managing your stress, the likelihood is you're causing a second order effect on other people. There's a lovely expression, it's been around for a while, basically, under stress, we regress. So it doesn't matter how transformational or relational you are as a leader, the likelihood is if your stress isn't being well managed, you're not performing at your best. 80% of our performance is down to our mindset, and stress eats mindset for breakfast. So what might be happening? I call this in my coaching an accidental monster. You take thoroughly nice people, you dial up the stress, and all of a sudden they become accidental monsters. Okay. So let's say we've made the case that doing something about our stress and building our resilience is important. What could we do? Next slide, please. If you Google top 10 tips for building your resilience, you get 49 million returns. 49 million. How on earth are you going to pick what works for you out of 49 million? And here's the thing, and you'll have to click as I say this, I'm afraid. There are 3 ways to build your resilience. There are 4 ways to build your resilience. There are 5 skills to build your resilience. There are 7 C's to build your resilience. If you can click on a few times for me, please. Lovely, thank you. There are 8 tips to build your resilience. And there are 10 tips to build your resilience. Everyone's got an idea, including Janine from Accounts. Has Janine from Accounts told you to try yoga because she swears by it? Or maybe meditation, you gave that a go. So here's why I get ranty about this. Can you imagine walking into a doctor's surgery? Something's been bugging you. You tell the doctor nothing about your ailments, your symptoms, how long it's been going on for, what impact it's having on you, or anything like that. The doctor grabs that massive almanac of drugs, flicks through it, finds something they rather like the look of, and sends you on your merry way with a prescription for which neither of you know whether or not it's actually going to work for you. It's a bit nuts, right? But when we start doing things like Google top 10 tips for resilience and we pick up some of these things, that's exactly what we're doing. Next slide, please. So I think our stress is unique. I am about to build a diagram that I have adapted from an article in the British Medical Journal all about stress. And the key thing is that our stress is unique to us, and therefore so should our resilience building activity be unique to us. So first click on the slide, please. So number 1, our environments are different. There's that lovely expression. We may all be in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. So take COVID, for example. Are you a single mother of 3 boys living in a pentop, a high-rise apartment? Or are you a relatively affluent retiree living somewhere in the leafy suburbs? Your experience of lockdown will have been exceedingly different. Second click, please. We are all gloriously individual. So in neuro-linguistic programming terms, we have very different maps of the world based on our experiences, our personalities, the way we've been brought up, etc. So if our experience of the world is different because we're in different environments, and our map of the world is different because of our individuality, well, it stands to reason that our perception of threat is probably going to be different. Next click, please. So what stresses you out may not stress me out. What stresses me out may not stress you out. Where I see danger, you see fun. And here's the thing, if we look at situations really differently, the likelihood is we're going to react in really different ways. Next click, please. So depending on how we view something, we'll either be in a high stress state or a low stress state. So let's say you hate public speaking. Right now, you're in a high stress state. And here's the thing, the longer we stay in that high stress state, the more damaging it becomes. Damaging in two ways. The first one is the more stressed we are, the likelihood is we're going to view things in a negative way. So we're then going to dial up that perception of stress, and it's going to like negatively reinforce and feed our perceptions of what's going on for us. Secondly, when we get stressed and we flood our systems with cortisol, it actually makes cellular changes to the hippocampus. And as a result of that, that means our ability to regulate our cortisol gets worse. So physically, physiologically, and psychologically, high stress feeds high stress. So the sooner that we can break that cycle, the better. Okay, next click, please. So if we're in different environments and we have different personalities and we see stress environments differently or threat differently, the likelihood is we're going to respond differently in our stress responses as well. So that list of stress responses I've just shared with you, maybe your fingers are perfectly safe. Mine weren't. You might be the kind of person who's got really helpful strategies. You reach for the trainers. I reach for the glass of wine, slightly less helpful. So if our stress comes from different places and shows up in different ways, next click, please. Funny old thing, our resilience building activity should be different. So for me, the key tenet of how I help my clients when it comes to stress is our stress deserves diagnosis, just like any other medical ailment. Don't fix it unless you know what you're looking at. Next slide, please. Okay, unless you're unconvinced, let me use me as a case study. So I suffer with insomnia. Not the can't fall asleep kind, but oh look, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and my brain is on fire kind. Apparently, I uttered an expletive at 3 o'clock this morning as I remembered something important. There should be another click on if you wouldn't mind, please. So if I stick with the insomnia, I am looking at sleep hygiene kind of mitigation strategies. So all the stuff that you see there, managing my stimulants, managing the temperature of my room, blue light management, or I could get Sleep Smarter by this chap, 21 essential strategies to sleep your way to a better body. Who wouldn't like that? But let's dig a bit deeper, right? So this is my value chain. I get insomnia because I worry about things, like public speaking engagements to faceless strangers. And that worry comes from underconfidence. I have a tendency to underconfidence. So if I'd left my diagnostic only at the insomnia, you can see, next click please, that actually none of that sleep hygiene stuff helps me with the underconfidence. It helps me with the symptom, but not the cause. So using this kind of like, if you like, new diagnostic data, I'm adding different things. So as well as the sleep hygiene, I'm adding practical aspects like a notebook by the bed to catch that, goodness me, what was that I'd forgotten at 3 o'clock this morning. Scheduling plenty enough time for rehearsals so that I feel as confident as I can when I come and do something like this. I'm adding some emotional aspects to deal with the underconfidence, like something like reframing. So I'll say to myself something like, the ship isn't sinking. It isn't, is it? I might also do a bit of visioning. So I imagine myself being successful and saying something funny and the audience laughing, which of course I can't see, but that was your cue in case you're unsure. So for me, it's the combination of these strategies that makes my resilience building efforts much more pertinent and powerful, because I'm getting at cause as well as symptom. Next slide, please. So this is something I use in my day-to-day coaching. The name of it can be a bit Marmite. It's something called mental toughness, which I know kind of, has connotations of macho or male or, aggressive or something like that. But actually the content of it is really sound. So there's a very clever chap called Professor Peter Clough, and he did a lot of research into things like mental toughness, stress, resilience, etc. And he kept having these four components kept reappearing, and that's what we call the four C's. So around this pizza model that you can see in front of me, it's the four C's around the outside. Now, if you cut the pizza in half horizontally, the green and the grey quadrants are all about resilience. They're all about surviving. So it's all about getting on with things, taking charge of what you can, not giving in, not giving up. If you add on the bottom half of the pizza, what you get is a bit more optimism, a bit more kind of seizing opportunities. And that moves you from surviving into thriving. Now, let me bring each of the C's to life for you. And you can see that each C has got two subcomponents underneath them. So if we start top left, control. This is the extent to which you feel sometimes like a cork on a wave. Life kind of happens around you, or, if you set your mind to it, you will achieve it. That's the life control. And then the emotional control is the extent to which that you feel able to emotionally regulate. And here's the thing. If you don't sleep very well, your ability to emotionally regulate is severely impacted. Top right is commitment. So that's goal orientation. That's the extent to which I like goals. I like to set them. And then achievement orientation is, having achieved goals is important to me. So do you add things to a list of things to do just so you can cross them off, for example? Bottom right is challenge. So two aspects to this. To what extent do you like being out of your comfort zone? Do you like to do new stuff? That's risk orientation. And then learning orientation is around the extent to which that failure is a source of learning for you or something to be avoided at all costs, quite frankly. And then finally, bottom left, we've got confidence. So confidence in abilities. That's, to what extent do I believe that I'm any good at what I do? And then interpersonal confidence is to what extent do I feel like I can stand my ground with other people or be heard or make my case or something like that. Now, here's the thing. I talked about confidence last because it's the most volatile of all of these components. It has the ability to kind of weaken, if you like, no matter how much we're working in the other places. So, how strong we are in terms of everything else that's going on for us. So if ever I'm working with a client who demonstrates a lack of confidence or a lower scoring confidence, we tend to work on that first because the others will naturally follow. And let me tell you a story again just to bring this to life. So I had a client who came to me looking for time management help and also help with an underperforming team. They were approaching burnout, that was self-declared, and so we put them through this assessment. And what became really clear was that they were suffering with a confidence crisis, and the way that was showing up was twofold. They were not saying no to anything. They showed me their phone once. I said, "Look at this diary. I've got a minute to myself." And when I said, "Well, who says yes to those things?" That was them. They felt like they couldn't say no. They had to be everywhere. And a corollary of that was they had no time to then spend with their team. So their team were performing as best as they could, but in some respects in a bit of a vacuum. So by working on their confidence, we actually made a difference to their time management and their team's performance. But if we'd only focused on what they were presenting with, we might not have made quite as much progress as we did. If you can click on for me, please. So each of these subcomponents could be a trigger for us. And I'm wondering if any of this has resonated with you while I'm speaking. Next click for me, please. By understanding which of those C's might be a trigger for you or which of those subcomponents might be a trigger for you, you can get better at choosing resilience building activities. And I'll show you kind of how in a bit. Next slide, please. Thank you. I did have another poll to run here, but I have no idea if they're working or not. So I might just crack on. Oh, are they working? Has that somebody come on? Understanding which of those C's might be.
Yeah, yes. If you run
they're
the
working.
poll.
As in, I need to do that.
Yeah, if you ask a question and then I'll be able to relay the answers to you.
Perfect. Okay. So the question I was going to ask is, which of these four C's, having now heard me speak, do you think might be a trigger for you? And I think there should be an opportunity either for you to put in chat or Q&A or somewhere, which of those four C's you think might be troublesome to you. Perfect. Okay. So the question I was going to ask is, which of these four C's, having now we'd only focused on what they were presenting with.
Brill. So the
What have we
votes are
got?
coming in thick and fast.
Lovely.
But At the moment, we're looking around 20% saying control,
Mm.
30% saying commitment,
Mm-hmm.
15% saying challenge, and 50% saying confidence.
Mm. Interesting. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for sharing those views. Just out of interest, while I've got you, what was the majority? Where did people sit on the stress levels?
They sat, sorry, just give me 2 seconds.
Of course. Sorry.
On stress levels, we had 15% 0 to 3,
Yep.
57% 4 to 6,
Yep.
17% 7 to 10, and
Yep.
9% were through the roof.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So, just out of interest, I do this kind of presentation and topics like this quite a lot, and invariably, a good percentage of people come out at that level 4 to 6. And on the face of it, that might not feel too scary, but if you think of stress as having two components, one being acute and one being chronic, so the acute is, perhaps a sinking ship and it sends you through the roof, but the chronic is the stuff we're living with day to day, and how much little or less of a stimulant might it need or take in order to send you through the roof on that particular stress levels. So thank you for that. Okay, so on the screen in front of you is something I like to call a naked pizza. So what I intend to do, if you could click on for me, please, is to invite individuals to give themselves a score between 1 and 10. 1 is I'm nowhere where I want to be on this component. 10 is I'm nailing it. Next topic, please. The next thing I do, if you can click on again for me, please, is to think about where folks would like to get to. So you end up with this sort of as is and to be. And the reason that's really helpful is, as you can see from this diagram, is a really obvious place where we might want to focus, if you like, a laser focus on our efforts in terms of how we might build our resilience. So in this individual's case, that achievement orientation, so the ability to achieve things and tick things off a list, seems to be getting in their way. So the beautiful thing about that is you kind of get almost like a single focus to put your effort. So rather than trying to make progress against lots of kind of aspects of your life, you can really hone in on something that might make a difference. Next slide, please. So here is what I'm inviting you to do as individuals in order to build your resilience. The first one is really get to grips with your stress, where it comes from. Why do you get triggered? How do you get triggered? Why do you get triggered in that way? What is that all about? Then be really clear on what your stress response is. Now, if you're anything like me, you're running at 300 miles an hour. So quite frankly, you don't notice, or if you do notice, you notice and then discard. And it takes a moment to reflect and go, actually, what is going on for me? Maybe listen to people, or have somebody who can speak truth to power who says to you, do you know what? I think you might be stressed. Because I find, certainly for myself, I'm not always totally in touch with what my stress is doing. So I've given you a long list there. And again, as I said, I wouldn't have attributed all of those to stress. I just thought they were things, and yet they are absolutely stress responses. So once you've kind of done that diagnostic, so generate your own value chain, like you saw mine from the confidence to the insomnia, then you can choose what to do next. You can pick a C to put your shoulder behind. You can think of something specific that you want to work on. That way you can actually Google, specifically, I want to build my confidence, rather than top 10 tips for resilience. You can get more specific, and specific is terrific. Because here's the thing, right? Treatment without diagnosis is malpractice, and I'm not sure that anybody wants to be in that place. Okay, so let's say you've done some diagnostic, you've got a bit of insight as to what stress is going on for you, how that works, why it's looking the way it is. What next? Next slide, please. So if you did wade your way through those 49 million ways to build your resilience, what you might find is that they're sort of grouped in a way, maybe around domains like the cognitive domain, maybe around energies, maybe around practical aspects. And some of those will naturally kind of feel like they're more you than you might at first think. So if you can have the first click for me, please. So for me, I'm drawn to action oriented. I'm all about that. I just need to, action my way out of whatever's going on. So I'm all about time management, to-do lists. The radio is the first casualty if I've got to do some concentration, things like that. And that's cool, but none of that really addresses my underconfidence issues. So it gives me some sense of confidence. So knowing what I've got to do and when I've got to do it and that kind of stuff is kind of helpful, but it's not enough. Next click for me, please. So ordinarily, this sort of stuff, the emotion oriented, is a bit woo for me. I kind of want to run screaming. The idea that I might stand in front of the mirror telling myself that I'm happy, handsome, and clever, or whatever it is, not so much. And yet, what we've seen from my case study is the visualization and the reframing is what I need in order to deal with the underconfidence issues. Next click for me, please. Now, I do spend some time in this particular column. So I do try and manage exercise, diet, and sleep in particular, because it's important. Now, I listened to a podcast by a chap called Dr. John Finn, who is all about resilience too. And he draws a very close correlation between these three ingredients. So he basically says, if you haven't slept very well, the likelihood is you won't make good diet choices and you probably won't be up for exercise. And conversely, if you don't do any exercise and you eat badly, and particularly late, then your sleep will be impacted. So there's like an interplay, not only within the column, but between the columns in terms of how one feeds another. If I've not slept very well, the likelihood is I'm probably not going to be so good at my visualizations and my reframing. And it's a result of that diagnostic that I'm now taking a much broader suite of resilience building activities than ordinarily I'd be drawn to. So ordinarily, I'm all in the action, bit in the energy, no thanks to the emotion. And yet, that's where I need help. Next click, please. What I've done is I've mapped some of those C's to, the bits that they can help with. So if control is your thing, what is it that you can do? Maybe the action oriented is useful for you, but maybe it is all about the energy management. So the good thing is, by having done that diagnostic, I've got some mitigation strategies which are bespoke to me, and they will help me build my resilience. Not anybody else's, certainly not Jean from accounts, but mine. Next slide, please. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is just take a moment. You've reflected on which of those C's might be a thing for you. What specifically could you do that would move where you are now on that C just a smidge to the right? Where could you just make a notch of movement? As I say, if you are interested, this is included in the workbook you can get access to afterwards, or you can jot it on a piece of paper, whatever kind of works for you. So my plea to you, really, is no more top tips, no more advice from other people. Do your homework when it comes to analysing what it is about your stress that needs fixing. Now, you can crowdsource ideas. I'm not saying that you have to come up with all the answers yourself, but perhaps treat those ideas like a rugby ball. And what I mean by that is you can either run with it, you can kick it into touch, or you can pass it on to somebody else. But make sure when you decide what you're going to do with that rugby ball that you've done the comparison between symptom and cause of your stress and whether or not it will actually make a difference both to the cause and the symptom. Next slide, please. So that's all I was going to share with you this morning. I think I'm to time, she says, looking at her watch. As I say, I've got my contact details on the bottom there. I'd love to hear from you in terms of, how this has shown up for you, whether or not this has worked for you. If you'd like the Naked Pizza workbook. On my website, which you saw on that last slide, it does talk about, there's a little quiz you can do, actually, a free quiz you can do, which is all about mental toughness, gives you a couple of page report. And then there should be links on there. If they're not, feel free to contact me, where you can do the proper assessment. So it's an 18-page report and an hour's coaching with me, if that sounds of interest. And that really gets under the skin. That's what we did with my client who came in presenting with time management and team performance issues. It's been fabulous to sort of talk to you because I can't see anybody. I'm very happy now to take any questions that may have appeared.
Brilliant, Joanna. Thank you ever so much for that.
You're very welcome.
There's loads of questions just flooding into the Q&A, so I'm just going to find the ones with the most votes and start on those. The first one we've got is, how do I tackle a persistent confidence crisis that stops progression despite good feedback from those around me about my abilities?
I've got two responses. One is flippant and to be taken in the spirit of that, and the other one isn't. The first one is get a coach. because actually that's exactly what they do, particularly if they're a performance coach. They will address issues like that. Secondly, I think there's plenty of material out there, whether it's courses, whether it's online, whether it is something like a coach or a mentor or something like that, to help deal with confidence crisis. So this is something that's been like a constant theme in my life. I once had a line manager that described me as a swirling mass of insecurities, which, by the way, is not the thing you say to somebody who has a swirling mass of insecurities. So there is, you can, if you like, thrive with it. You don't just have to live with it or survive on it. But there are things you can do. I guess it's about finding what fits for you. For me personally, it was coaching that helped me most, rather than confidence building courses or anything like that. But if I can be the embodiment of hope that a confidence crisis shouldn't get in your way, then I hope that helps.
Brill, thank you. I think that, what you said there is really interesting, because sometimes we always feel like we need to take it on ourselves to solve the issue, and actually
I'm not
using
sure
that
we
help.
can. I sometimes I think we're too close to it, and particularly if you get trapped in the old noggin, I'm not sure we always have the most accurate evidence base. So what I find in my coaching is I have to keep inviting my clients to find a different evidence base, because the one they default to is flawed. So then when I was talking to a client, I think it was only yesterday or the day before, and in the course of our conversation, we're like, oh yeah, I did that, and oh yeah, I did that, and it feels like we're really quick at forgetting all the great things we've done and only remembering the moments where it went a bit wrong.
Yeah, completely. All right, so these two, I've got two questions that probably follow one from the other. So I'll start with one and then supplement it with the other after. And it's, how do you identify the specific cause when it seems as though stress is caused by multiple factors and they're all overwhelming you?
Yeah, I think that might be a bit of a case of perhaps being too close to the challenge as well. What I found with certain clients is there may be a number of things, but they've probably got a similar root cause in some way. So they may show up in different ways, but actually the cause is the same. So I was holding one of my resilience boot camps this week, and one of the people there was talking about very difficult circumstances across the domestic and the professional. So on the face of it, a range of difficulties. But actually, once we dug a bit deeper, it all came down to interpersonal confidence.
Yeah, I'd agree. And the next part of that is, how can I effectively communicate with my team when I feel stressed without seeming like I can't manage?
Yeah. I mean, the first one might be a bit of a newsflash. I suspect they know you're stressed long before you utter anything. I had a chief when I was younger who said to me, I can tell the mood you're in by the way you walk through the office. Which actually horrified me, because he also then said we moderate what we do as a result of what mood we think you're in. So I think probably we leak a lot more than we think. I wonder if sometimes, especially in terms of something like relational leadership, where it's not unhelpful to share what's going on for us. I mean, I don't mean, kind of sit there and, oh, life's rubbish, you'll never guess. But actually, I'm finding things a bit tricky now because of X, Y, and Z. So you might find that showing up in the way that I talk to you or the way that I manage things. And then kind of invite them. So in this particular instance with the chief, for example, I basically said to him, can you please tell the team that until I've had 2 coffees, they're not to take me seriously. To kind of situate it in the fact that it wasn't about them, it was more about I was still a bit groggy and sleepy, and that my way of dealing with that was just to be a bit introverted. So kind of state what you need from the team in order to kind of deal with that. And for me, that doesn't feel needy. That just feels part of, that kind of powerful leadership relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good tip. And the next question we have, that's a good one actually. Do you have any tips for dealing with the brain fuzz that comes in a high stress situation?
Oh, gosh. um, I guess the way that I've done it is taking time out in some way. So during the incident, there were some moments where I definitely had brain fog. And I find that popping to the loo was quite helpful, whether I needed the loo or not. But just giving myself time and space to kind of take a deep breath and give myself a metaphorical shake. I think also if there's like coping strategies you have, aid memoirs. So as a damage control officer, there's this massive book about how you can manage incidents. Now, interestingly, it was kind of partially helpful because it helps you deal with 2 floods, not 8. But there were still some bits in there that I could use almost like a handrail, that kind of grounded me a bit. So maybe there's some things, some strategies, or some. I'm always encouraging clients to have something very visual that kind of anchors them in some way, whether it's about achievements or an evidence base about their success, or whether it's about actions in the event of, or something like that. So anything that's visual that you can kind of be drawn to, but anything which just kind of reminds you of the classic, the first steps, or the way to think about something, or as I say, just giving yourself some time out.
Yeah, and you've said obviously the stressful situation with the flooding. Obviously, you reflect on that, and it forms a lot of how you go about your personal and professional life in the current day.
Yes.
Just out of interest, do you ever have the moment where you're feeling a bit overwhelmed? Do you ever just sit yourself down and say, "Well, I dealt with that. I overcame that"?
I do, actually. So me and the other officers often have a conversation about during that moment, there was nothing to say that we wouldn't have been found rocking in our cabins. And the fact that we weren't, and cracked on with the job, despite, I was frightened. So, let me just kind of be clear on this. I remember somebody asking me straight after the flood, "Were you frightened?" And I was like, "No, don't be so silly. I was too busy." That's utter nonsense. I was absolutely petrified. But the key thing for me was like managing that fear in order to get on with the job. So I do every now and again have to remind myself that if I can perform in that circumstance, then really how bad can it be? And when I was a consultant, and I don't know if any of the PA crowd are on here that know me, when things were getting difficult on an assignment, I used to say, "It's okay, the ship's not sinking." And I wasn't trying to be flippant, but I was trying to kind of, if you like, provide a reference point for how bad things really were.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've got time for one more question, and actually, it sort of looks at it from the other perspective here. It says, as most of us work within a team, how can we best help a team member who's struggling to cope with
Ooh,
stress?
that's a good one. So actually, this is something that I do as part of my kind of offering, if you like, which is helping people manage other people, both in terms of as individuals, there is a responsibility for us to manage upwards, but also as a team member, as you say. And I guess there's kind of two aspects to this. One is drawn from mental health first aid training, if any of you have ever done that. There's a fabulous bit in the mental health first aid training which kind of helps you have what is quite a difficult conversation. How do you start a conversation with somebody that says, "So things aren't looking good for you right now"? And how do you start the conversation? The second one is actually using the 4 C's as a means of helping them diagnose their own stress. So in the nicest, empathetic way, kind of testing. Are you feeling out of control? Or, does this feel like it's robbing you of control? Or is this jarring your confidence or something like that? See if one of those C's resonates with them, and kind of help them to see what's going on for them. But for me, the mental health first aid approach of having that conversation where you kind of, ease gently in, I think is quite helpful to having what can be quite a tough conversation. Sometimes as well, I think just sharing what you're noticing. If you are running at 300 miles an hour and you've stopped paying attention to what's going on for you, I think somebody going, "You're showing up like this. Anything I can help with?" That can often be quite helpful as a kind of stop you in your tracks.
Yeah, I'm sat here nodding. I realise you can't see me, but I'm sat here nodding behind the
I
screen
really
in
can't.
entire agreement. Um, but no, so yeah, I agree with that, and I think most organisations now are certainly, from my perspective, I'm happy for you to counter that, do have a support system in place for people who are struggling with stress. So um, even just knowing that system's there and how to signpost and direct people towards that system
Yeah.
can be really useful.
I do. And I think, we've seen lots in the media about it's okay to not be okay. And there's a role for us as leaders to create that psychological safety where people can admit that it's not going so great for them right now. But also that kind of sense of teamwork where you kind of notice what's going on for people. And I hear lots of conversations about remote working kind of robbing us of the opportunities to spot people in the coffee queue, or at the water cooler, and kind of notice, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on for them right now. But I do think there's an opportunity, when you have regular conversations, you can still spot when somebody's not at their best.
Yeah, I agree. And do you think, and this is possibly slightly off kilter, but do you think the use of sort of the video conferencing as opposed to sort of just voice phone calls is an important part of that when we are working virtually?
I think it depends. There's lots of different preferences, isn't there? So some people like to have, if you like, the anonymity. Sometimes I find people much more honest when I'm coaching them over the telephone because I'm not looking at them. I think some people, so as a coach, I like to see the facial expressions of the folks I'm dealing with because I get a lot of, what's not being said as well as what's being said. And I think we can do that as colleagues as well. If we're all high on our emotional intelligence, we will spot when, those micro expressions that give things away. I think it really is personal preference. I think video might help though in seeing the unsaid.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I reckon I'm going to squeeze in one more question,
Go on then.
because I quite like it. So, and I think I'm really interested to hear how you do it. So the question is, how do you know when you're achieving that mental resilience without putting yourself in sort of a typical high stress situation?
Oh yeah. Well, there is a bit about, we don't get fitter by not going to the gym. So in some respects, that comes down to our kind of like, that control bucket, our desire to be out of our comfort zone and our willingness to learn from failure. I think in some respects, when you know, you'll know. So I invite clients often to take a longitudinal view. So invariably, I work with clients for a fixed period of time, and we do an assessment at the beginning. Give yourself a score out of 10 about how you're feeling about X, Y, and Z. And then we do an assessment at the end. And what I don't do is I don't share the scores at the beginning. I just kind of ask them fresh, and invariably they don't take the notes, so that's very handy. And 9 times out of 10, there has been a manifest move in how they feel about things. But you don't need a coach to help you with that. You can just track that yourself using journaling or something like that. But I do think taking a longitudinal view, because it's a bit like one of those charts when you look at the share prices. If you zoom in, it looks awful. But if you look at it over time, it's mainly going up in, kind of a nice trend. I think sometimes we'll only know in our rearview mirror. It's one of those things we'll only spot how far we've come when we take the opportunity to look back, and how many of us take the opportunity to look back.
Yes. Yeah, I think, very true. There's one more question on here that says, can you please share again Joanna's website? But what I'll say is, we'll put the website into the chat for the stage. So that's good. I'll pop that in
Lovely.
there. Oh, actually, there's one more question that's sat in the chat, not the Q&A.
Go on.
And it says, do you have any suggestions on how to deal with the stress and anxiety that appears to arise from the menopause?
Oh, crikey.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm currently enjoying that thing right now. I guess 3 things. I'm starting to embrace more carefully than I might have done previously that this thing is going on. So last week I was offered some negative feedback, and it was the wrong time to offer me the negative feedback, if you get me. And I admitted to myself that my reaction to it was probably partially my reaction and partially something else. And kind of acknowledging that my reaction may not have been wholly mine. There might have been a different facet in there, I think is helpful. The other thing is, I would say, get private medical help, because that made a massive difference for me. And the other one is the energy bucket does make a huge difference. So it's really irritating, isn't it, that managing our diet and our exercise and our sleep makes a huge contribution to lots of things, because, quite frankly, wine is much more interesting, but it does make a difference. So those are my 3 recommendations based on my experience.
Brill, thank you. I think we are running out of time, but Joanna, this has been so interesting and really useful.
Thank you. I'm
Everyone's
delighted.
saying thank you I've got Q&As coming in saying thank you and everything. So I've really enjoyed listening
Can
to
we
this
check?
one.
Did anyone have to call 999 when I shouted flood, flood, flood?
I don't know. It shocked me with my headphones.
That
I
was the
have to say, I
idea.
jumped back from the screen a bit. But no, thank you ever so much. It's been really great listening to what you have to say.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed it.
It's been
And
a real pleasure and privilege, and it's been fabulous to even play a minor part on the journey of this fabulous entity. So nice one, Angela.
Brill, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.